I want to make an introduction. My name's Harrison Kelly. I'm a regional director here at Instructure, and it's my job to help schools and teachers navigate the teaching and learning landscape in a way that enables them to deliver against the demands of the evolving education ecosystem in an effective and reliable way. Supporting me today is our live team, composed of these lovely individuals that you'll see on the screen. We've got Jared Ward, Julian Ridden, and Faith Chatzer. I want to cover who John Hattie is, what his studies tell us, what is an LMS and why is it important, and then I'll outline which of the activities we'll demonstrate that support Hattie strategies. So who is John Hattie? Well, for those of you who don't know, he's an educational researcher who focused predominantly on measurement models and their application to educational problems. Of particular importance are his models for teaching and learning. Hattie has synthesized data from over 300 million students, comprised of 80,000 studies and 1,400 meta-analyses, to identify influences on achievement in school-age students. The result of these studies is presented in his well-known book, Visible Learning, from which we have derived a lot of the information to be presented today. So what do his studies mean? Now, look, we know that over the last few decades, Hattie's visible learning is one of a number of models that the education ecosystem and the education system has seen. There's been ongoing debate around the effect of certain activities or the nature of his meta-analyses, but the underlying statement is unanimously agreed upon. There are evidence-based teaching strategies that, on average, are more impactful than others. So how did Hattie measure this? How do you plot which strategies or activities are shown to be more effective than others? On the slide, you will see what is referred to as Hattie's barometer of influence. He looked at over 250 different influences, as of today, 252, related to achievement, and categorized each into four distinct sizes. Reverse effects, or those that showed a decrease in achievement. Developmental effects, what students could achieve without schooling. Teacher effects, traditional, typical teaching effects over the course of a year. And then what is known as the zone of desired effects, or the strategies that have a measurable increase in student performance relative to the other sizes. And so this is where we really want to focus on today. The numbers that we see from minus 0.2 all the way to 1 and above indicate the effect of these activities, with 0.4 being sort of the average or your typical effect. To give a little bit of context around what those numbers actually mean, a measurement of 1 is defined as 1 standard deviation on the outcome, i.e. students who partook in these activities performed 1 standard deviation better than when they didn't. The higher the effect, the greater the number. So why an LMS? I think before we talk about why an LMS, we need to talk about what is an LMS. You know, once synonymous with Blackboard, LMSs have come a long way and are now the preferred method of delivering modern student-centered learning. Put simply, an LMS is a platform for creation, curation, and distribution of content that leverages best-of-breed education tools to create a personalized and differentiated learning experience for each student. Workflow efficiencies within the LMS actually allow teachers to save significant time and deliver rich and highly engaging content and feedback that is proven to enable better student outcomes. An LMS is often seen as the most critical platform for delivering a truly native blended or flipped classroom experience. I always like to put this visual up when I talk about LMSs, because much in the same way as we have institutional fragmentation, whether as teachers or institutions, we need to look at a number of different models and pedagogies and way that we manage things. You know what, for someone in year 7, they might have 6 different teachers, and those teachers use a number of different applications that are all highly engaging in their own right. It gets really, really difficult to manage, and it's not overly conducive to learning. So really what an LMS is about a single place for students to go that's easy to use, highly intuitive, and enables better student outcomes. So why is an LMS important in the context of Hattie's visible learning? Well, many of the learning strategies that Hattie has talked about over the ages have historically been difficult to achieve for a number of reasons. We often hear resources, enablement, and availability. The biggest points though, teachers don't often have the mechanism nor the time to implement some of these strategies successfully. And so today, I want to demonstrate how we can do this leveraging a model learning platform. So here are the 6 different activities in the zone of desired effects that we'll be showcasing. I'll be defining the importance of each as we go through these during the remainder of the webinar. What we particularly find of interest in the update is that many of the factors recently added have a foundation in technology, which lends credence to why critical systems like modern learning platforms are becoming mainstream. Now with that, guys, what I want to do is I want to share my screen and I want to take you through a bit of a live demo and a workflow of how we can achieve some of these strategies through activities that are achievable in an LMS. So look, I just want to talk just a little bit around what you can see on your screen here. So this is the Canvas homepage. Now, I don't want to talk too deep into Canvas, but I just want to contextualize this for a little bit for a couple of you on there, because we're going to be coming to this back to this page a little bit. Just on the left, we have our navigation bar that you can see there. On the right, I have some of my to-do things. So I'm logged in as a teacher at the moment, and these are the most critical things for me to achieve, and that generally results in grading or giving feedback to my students. I can see what's coming up, but down here at the bottom, the dashboard, these are the classes that I actually teach. So that's just a little bit about how I want to share just contextually Canvas, and we'll be coming back to this dashboard a little bit. So I just wanted to add an air of familiarity to what we'll be showcasing here. So self-reported grades, the first area and aspect that we want to talk about. You know, this is not surprisingly one of the most impactful strategies in Hattie's list. You know, we already see in face-to-face teaching a recognized desire for student self-reflection and a need to build on their metacognitive abilities. Hattie has often said he likens self-reported grades to student or self-expectations, as he generally observed that students are able to predict their own performance with the most accuracy. But as we all know, accuracy isn't necessarily a point of intervention. It doesn't inherently help students. What it's really about is understanding how to help students exceed their expectations. Because when students perform better than expected, they gain confidence and achieve at higher levels. So to demonstrate this, we need to give students a vehicle for calculating hypothetical grades for their work. If we can enable these expectations, it means that students can not only monitor their progress, but with the correct encouragement, exceed their own expectations for achievement. Now, I'm just going to scroll across. You can see there, if I look in, that I have my physical science course just here. If I click into that, it's going to take me across and take me through, as a student here, as Dominic, into my physical science class. Now, I'm just going to click on marks because we want to talk, obviously, about self-reported grades here. And this is where, at a nice snapshot, I can have a look at the different assignments or different assessments, different pieces of work that have been associated against an outcome. Now you can see on the top right that I have a show, save, what if scores. And what that does is it actually enables me to start entering scores as a student within the context of my learning environment. So if we go down here, we can have a look at some of the things that I might have upcoming, and maybe I want to click to test a different score. So if I go in here, I know that, you know what, I'm actually quite good when it comes to the vacuum hypothesis, and I think that I'm probably around a 16. But something that I might not be quite as adept at, maybe a 14. Now I'm quite a high achiever, but like that, you can see just how the what if grades have tallied up my total. Now, one of the great things about a learning platform and about a modern learning platform is the need for iterative submissions. And I'm going to talk a little bit about this today because at one stage in time, it was awfully time consuming. The general workflow of going through and having teachers remark and do all that, it wasn't necessarily conducive. But having a platform first methodology and being able to have this within a nice workflow actually enables students to get just-in-time instruction and deliver on different outcomes. So if we have a look here at one of the assessments, I have 3 specific areas that I can actually have a look about how I marked or how my assessment was marked. Now I know that this is that I have a number of submissions that I can make in this. So I actually want to contextualize, take on board the feedback that I've got, and have a look at a new score that I need to input to help me with my what if grade assessment. So if I come down here, I can actually look at my rubric. How have I been achieving against the certain criteria and outcomes that we've attributed to this rubric. So the first three you can see there: hypothesis, design, creativity. These are criteria. The bottom one there is against outcome, and we'll be having a look a little bit around mastery learning momentarily. So in a nice quick snapshot as a student, I can see where, hey, maybe I need to improve, and I can get an understanding of what I need to do in order to increase my perceived what-if grade. Further to that, it's always really important for me to know that how I'm doing relative to the class. So I can see there what the low is, what the high is, and the mean is. Now I know that if I historically perform better than the average in a classroom environment, the chances are this wasn't a good performance from me, and using some of the context and the instruction and understanding that my teachers deliver, I think that I can actually push that score up and do above the mean there. Additionally, if I click on this, I can have a look at some of the comments. So here my teachers input a nice rich comments, some text comments, and given me feedback that I can now use in my future submission. And the great thing about all of that is that if I click on here, I can now have a look at leveraging all of this, what I think that my grade's going to be. And I actually think that if I use the right things and my teacher helps in the right ways, that I can actually increase my grade to around a 20 of 22. Historically, a very difficult workflow to achieve in the current environment. But as you can see, this hasn't just enabled a student to enter what-if marks, but it's helped them to understand strict areas for improvement and thus more accurately predict scores based on rubrics, feedback, relative performances in the context of ongoing submissions. Consequently, and more importantly, from a teacher's point of view, this same process allows the teacher to understand more specifically what they need to employ to help students better perform than expected and exceed their own expectations. So guys, I'm not going to go too in depth into this, but what I really wanted to show you is a link between self-reported grades, what-if grades, and how that can be easily achieved in a modern day LMS. So with that, we're going to move to our first live poll. Really interested just to get an understanding around what people are, how people are actually using what-if grades, and we'd just love to get some answers there at the moment if we can, just so we can have a little bit of a look around how it's all been attributed in the current workflow in the current classroom. So for those of you that might not be partaking, the question is, do students at your school actively predict their marks feedback prior to an assessment? And the four options we have are all the time, sometimes, not really, or they don't have a mechanism to do it easily. Fantastic. So we're getting updates as they come through. Interestingly, we noticed that at the moment, yeah, okay, it's more toward that not really, or they don't really have a mechanism to do it easily. And I think that comes back to my point around the workflow. You know, there's two particular things here that I often like to talk about. It's one, are we actually enabling our students to do that? Do they have an easy way to do it? Or are we actually giving them the capacity and capability to do it within the workplace environment? Now, these are all coming through and I'm seeing a live update, but we're just about to send the live poll through to you momentarily. Just bear with us a minute and that'll come through. So there we go. So we know, look, interesting. It looks like a lot of people are falling really in the same area there down the bottom. If we have a look at that, sort of 82% of people saying not really, or they don't have a mechanism to do it easily. Hopefully, by leveraging a modern LMS, you can see how you can build that into a workflow and make it much easier to reach that desired effect of self-reported grade and strategy. Okay, guys, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to jump back to the user dashboard here. And what I want to talk about now is Hattie's second thing, and this is a response to intervention. So look, this is a simple but highly effective approach, and it's based on providing interventions for students by presenting the same subject matter in differentiated format. Now, quality student-centric technology like a modern LMS enables teachers to deliver multimodal materials to the entire class, even to students who've shown mastery or individual students that may need remediation. By using these platforms, teachers can use scaffolding systems to determine which students have mastered a topic or skill and which may need extra help. How students perform on an initial piece of work determines their customized learning path, enabling teachers to identify and prevent academic failure through early intervention, frequent progress measurement, and presenting materials in new ways. Now, historically, this has been a very difficult workflow again to manage. You know, I know that a lot of teachers, when we talk around time constraints and differentiated learning and individualized learning pathways, that as much as there may be a desire to do that because we know what the results can bring, having the mechanism or actually having the time to allocate resources to that is very, very difficult. So what I want to do here is show a nice, quick, easy method for how we can do that within the context of a learning management system. So I'm going to click into one of my courses that I'm teaching at the moment, this geology course. I'm going to go in here. We're just going to give it a minute. I think there's a couple of second delay in my screen and the sharing. So just to reiterate, I'm logged into a teacher here, as a teacher here. Now, if I go across to assignments, I want to create an assignment. Now, we use the term assignments here as anything that has an outcome or a criteria attached to it. It doesn't have to be a marked assignment. It doesn't have to be a point scale or a grade scale. The idea is that we have an outcome attached to a piece of work. Now, if I go over here, I'm going to start an assignment. With a quick click, I can create an assignment. And what I'm not going to go in and create an assignment for you just yet. We want to talk about content curation and creation in just a little bit. But I want to draw your attention to how we achieve differentiated learning and a clear response to intervention. So up here next to details, you'll notice I have a little thing, and this is what Canvas calls mastery paths or differentiated learning. If I go into this, I've done this as a typical assignment. So I've got a couple of different weighting criteria. So I've done this as your typical point scale between 0 and 23. Now we know, particularly in the context of group work with Hattie, that the initial intervention we often like to see scaffolded and tiered in sort of a group assignment. So let's talk a little bit around how we can do that. So I want you to imagine that you've delivered a piece of work, and this work happens to be out of 23. You know that there's a spectrum of learners in the class and that they're going to achieve at different levels. How do we start to differentiate and look at learning pathways that are right underneath that banner of response to intervention? How do we really start to engage and ensure that we're delivering that content in a controlled way? Well, what I want to do is imagine that you get a student that scores between 0 and 10. So they might score 5. If I click in here, it's automatically going to see what I've got covered in my LMS within this particular course. And I can start to add items that I as a teacher know will be best suited to them given the score that they will get. So I may say, hey, you know what? Everyone has a prerequisite. Everyone has to do a rock quiz. In fact, I can sort by all items and have a look at a number of different mediums that I want to deliver this content in. And let's say that maybe we want to do a discussion, and I actually want to add a discussion. And then additionally, I also want to have a look at, I'll go back to all items here, an Ages of Rocks activity. Now, if I click on add items, that instantly adds all the pieces of content, something that I've curated and delivered in this format. Now, we don't want to just be pushing students down a defined pathway. Oftentimes, we actually want to give them an element of self-directed learning. So how do we do that? Well, with a nice simple click, I can give the option of an and or. So as a student, if I'm progressing through this tiered system that's been put together by my teacher in a very discrete way, I have the option of doing the rock quiz and the field trip 3 discussion, or I can self-direct my learning and maybe say, you know what, I actually want to do the Ages of Rocks activity. Now, as a teacher, I know that these are both delivering to say the same outcomes or the same level of mastery that we want to see a student achieve at, but I'm giving them that element of self-directed learning there. Now, if I go into this middle stream, I've already mentioned that the rock quiz there, that's a prerequisite, but actually I now want to give them something a little more advanced, and I want them to look at a lecture, and then I also want them to go into a types of volcanoes lab. So just like that, they now have the workflow of being taken through this. And again, much in the same way I've spoken about, we can do that and or function. Again, to my top performing students, because even though Hattie talks about a response to intervention, he likes to say that it actually encompasses the full spectrum. It's not just about remediation, but it's also about engaging even accelerated students. So we know rock quiz, we know reading types is important, but we also want them to look at this, and we can do that. Now, the great thing about a model learning platform is that in adding these prerequisites and this level of differentiation and the function to highlight student direction, we can actually send these out discreetly and enable students to follow this at their own pace. So it's a really nice and easy way to start to get on board that level of differentiation and that response to intervention that we know is so important without having to spend arduous amounts of time or significant resources in being able to do that. Really, really important. You know, the opportunity to scaffold in conjunction with employing these activities, whether you're allowing group and sheltered instruction, they all aim to consistently measure outcomes and present the most relevant content in the most effective medium. The result and what we see, an effective response to intervention. Really, really critical, really, really important, and really, really easy to do it here. So I'm just going to go back to the dashboard for a second. And what I want to do is I want to turn to one of the most important things for me personally, providing formative evaluation. So this is right up there in terms of the zone of desired effects. And formative evaluation, for those of you that may need a bit of a refresher, it refers to any activity used to assess student knowledge before or during instruction that can guide the learning process. In other words, the way I like to look at it is it's about helping teachers decide what to do next and why they should be doing that. So modern day systems have a number of different avenues that enable teachers to provide this type of evaluation, often leveraging the third-party education app landscape or rich grading features that allow two-way communication between student and teacher. And what I want to do is demonstrate both of those to you today. So you might have mentioned there, you might have remembered that up in the beginning, I was logged in as a teacher and I said, I've got my to-do on the side here. You'll notice that one of the things I need to do as a teacher is actually grade a submission. And in keeping with the theme of geology, I'm going to grade tectonic plate demo assignment. So with a quick click, this is going to take me into what Canvas calls SpeedGrader. But for all intents and purposes, this is what we call a marking tool. So a number of modern day platforms have different marking tools that allow teachers, peer reviews, to give just-in-time and formative evaluation feedback in a very, very nice way. The focus here is on taking focus away from marks and away from grades and onto that feedback. Now, what I really want to focus on again, and I mentioned this earlier and I want to come back to that, is the nature of iterative submissions. Having a modern day learning platform in conjunction with a tool like SpeedGrader or a marking tool actually enables a very, very seamless and efficient workflow. And what it means is that we often see teachers utilizing ongoing iterative submissions to help direct and instruct the learning process. So you can see up here on the top right, I have a number of different decisions, Natalie has made a number of different submissions. And at the moment that I'm looking at the latest one here. Now, this is a PDF that's been uploaded, and I have some pretty standard things that I can do in marking tools. You know, I have point annotations, I have highlight annotations, I can add some free text if I want, I can strike out, I can highlight. Any certain areas that I think as a teacher or as a peer that the particular work might need improvement or focus on, I can be very pointed in doing that. The great thing is, particularly when we talk about responding and intervention, is I can actually start to get ongoing comment threads between the teacher and the student. Hattie often talks about not only formative evaluation, but reciprocal teaching. And what he says is it's really important for teachers to be in the shoes of the students. And this is one of the great ways that we can do that. In getting replies and comment threads, we can begin to start a discussion with students and teachers that enables both sides of the equation to be equally constructed and equally looked at. Further to this, if I go over to the right, I can have a look at the rubric. I can have a look as a student what I'm being marked against. The great thing about this from a teacher's point of view is as I'm marking this, whether this is pre or post assessment, I can start to look at the different ratings that are here and how they relate to the criteria. And for me, it's a nice, easy way to click on a couple of these as a teacher and quickly save those. Where this starts to get really powerful is when we look at the different comments and the different feedback that we can give. So you might see that I've got a media comment here. I've got a typical text comment. If I come down to the bottom right here, you'll notice that I can add a comment, I can attach a file. In fact, you know what? For accessibility purposes and also saving a significant period of time, I can look at speech to text. In addition to that, and where we find the most feedback and the best sort of feedback, particularly within the context of formative evaluation, is media. Now, just due to bandwidth, I'm not going to play this at the moment, but if I click on this, it gives me the option to do it via video or audio, and I can input a comment straight in there. Really, really important, particularly when it comes to formative evaluation, to have this sort of rich feedback. And what we see, and studies tell us, is that students that get this sort of feedback, as opposed to your traditional marking feedback, are actually 2.5 times more likely to implement it in future submissions. So there really is a link between what you can do in a marking application like this and enabling student outcomes. So what I want to do is I've showed you a traditional submission there. I want to move across and have a look at other submissions and how we can do that, because it's really important for us, particularly in the education landscape, to not necessarily hamstring students, but actually to tell them, you know what, we want you to use the tools of your choice, and these tools of your choice can help to conduct and underwrite different processes in Hattie's learning, formative evaluation being one of them. So here I have a student that's put in a YouTube video that perhaps she's created. She's referenced an image there, but below this, we now have a Google document. The great thing about this embedded doc is that this is actually a collaborative and sharing document. And I'm actually going to come back to the nature of cloud assignments and reciprocal teaching in the next area. But here's another way that as a teacher, I can take different mediums and provide that formative evaluation during an assessment. And particularly important, again, as we talk about iterative submissions and the way that we're starting to change that workflow. If I go to another student that's in here, and I'm going to pick on Dom, he's going to have a different medium as well. Now, what we're going to see from Dom, I'm just waiting for this to load up to you, is actually a video, and he's done it in a third-party application called ARC. Now, I'm going to play this video. I'm going to turn this off just for a moment. But what you can see is that video is actually quite passive. And this is one of the issues that we've had. At one point in time, it's quite novel, you know, and it was great to use and it was great to be engaging, but that time's passed. In fact, we've seen a lot of the courses in Canvas that I think there's about 11.3 or 11.8 videos in each course. So what it's telling us is that people are still leveraging videos, but are we doing it in the right way? Because when we talk about just-in-time instruction and giving this, when it comes to videos, we're very reactive about it. What we want to do is we actually want to have a look at how we can help direct and instruct during some of the media that we should allow our students to submit with. Now, the really interesting, where I've seen this done fantastically, and as I'm just going to hover over, you're just going to be able to see where the certain comments are in the video, is when we look at performance, when we look at design, when we look at monologues, sporting fixtures, we really start to see this formative evaluation pre and during assessment really shining through in a tool like ARC. Just another way of providing that, but I just wanted to show you how within the context of SpeedGrader, that's a really nice and easy way for teachers to stay out of the marking and the grading and focus on feedback. You know, ensuring the ability to give students rich feedback and just-in-time direction in a highly efficient and effective manner has always been resource intensive and time consuming for teachers. What I like about this and current cloud-based learning management systems is that they remove the inherent barriers in having to manage this process, whilst also allowing teachers to provide better feedback and more pointed evaluation. And I think we can all agree that that's something that's critical to increasing and improving student success and student outcomes. Now, here's our second live poll that I wanted to bring up. So we're just going to go back. The live team's just going to bring that up for you. I want to talk a little bit about leveraging technology as an enabler to maximize the quality of feedback at your school. And I really want you to think about this. I don't want you to think of it as, hey, look, someone is accessing some feedback that I've given on a piece of paper. How are you augmenting? How are you changing the formative evaluation and the feedback that you're starting to give to students in a 21st century way? So the results are just coming through at the moment. We're just going to take a nice 30-second break, and then what I'll do is we'll just talk a little bit about what the outcomes tell us. All right, results are just coming through now. We're just about to share them. Okay, there we go. Look, this doesn't surprise us. This is what we see. It's great to see that actually 14, 15% of you guys are using it frequently. You can see probably in the context of what I'm doing here that, or what we've shown here, that it can be hugely beneficial. Where we do see though, most of the people there in that sort of mid-range, we need to be doing it more, or we're doing it sometimes. And what we often see is that there's actually two reasons for it. One, we don't, again, have a built-in mechanism for it. Or second of all, we're still trying to decide how we need to bring it into our workflow. And so I'm hoping today, in looking at the entire workflow there, that you can see how you could leverage something like an LMS and like SpeedGrader in order to hopefully use technology as an enabler there. All right, guys, I'm just going to jump back into the demo. Thank you for your answers there. Just going to go back to the home screen that we all know and love there, the dashboard. And I want to move to reciprocal teaching. I spoke a little bit about reciprocal teaching just before, what it means within the context of how important that it is for both students and teachers. Look, I really want to define this model. It's defined very succinctly. It's around teachers guiding students in summarizing, generating questions, clarifying, and making predictions about materials presented or read. We often see that students then assume the role of the teacher and they lead discussions, most commonly in small groups, and that plays in nicely with Hattie's group assessment and group assignment mentality. Now, teachers can enrich the learning experience in modern LMSs by giving students numerous opportunities to lead, more so than in the traditional classroom. From cloud-based collaborations to sharing and working together synchronously in defined groups, students can partake and instruct in highly effective and controlled mediums, leading to, as we know reciprocal teaching does, an increase in knowledge retention. So what I want to look at today and right now is a little bit around collaborations and discussions. Some of those things that LMSs can bring to the table that are really nicely controlled and actually enable us to draw from a rich third-party landscape. So again, I'm going to go down here and I'm going to go into my geology course. I hope there's not too many geology teachers there. I didn't study it at school, so I apologize if anything I've got there is a little questionable. On the left here, down my navigation, you're going to see that I have collaborations. Now, I'm going to click on this. And I want to talk about two things. I'm just going to start a new collaboration here. The great thing about this is I now have two options. I can leverage two of the most common enterprise software platforms that we see, Google Apps or Microsoft Office 365. I showed the way a Google app and collaborative doc can be rendered in SpeedGrader. So for the purposes of this, I'm going to do it on Microsoft, but bear in mind that the workflow is identical for both. So I'm going to click on this. And it's going to give me the framework by which I can start to input information. Now, when we talk about collaborations, when we talk about cloud assessments or cloud pieces of work, what we're really talking about is giving students a median and a platform to leverage enterprise tools to help instruct and conduct teaching. A really, really critical part of reciprocal teaching. How do we give them their preferred choice of medium or a choice of medium by which they can really start to drive and deliver, instruct upon discussion and feedback? So here you'll notice that I'm putting together a Word document. I have Word, Excel, or PowerPoint. Everyone's familiar with Word, so I'm going to do that. I'm going to call this test document. And the description, I could put a description in there. For the purposes of this, I'm just going to keep it the same as what I've done with the document name. Now, in talking about reciprocal teaching and small group management, I can see the individual people that are in my class here, or I can actually go across the groups here and have a look at the different groups that I've set up. Now here, those top two groups, AA students and BB students, they may be a certain stream of and collection of students that I've put together in groups of 3 or 4, and I've designated and denoted that they're either a AA or a BB. In clicking on this, I can, with one click, add all those students into a cloud-based collaborative document. Alternatively, if I wanted to mix these groups up, I could get out of that and I could add, let's say, Natalie, James, and Jesse. So I'm adding these 3 people to the document. Now, if I go down here and press save, we're going to come back to that original screen you saw, and we're going to see the test document pop up. Now, this is where things get really, really interesting and powerful. If I click on this, it's actually going to go to the medium, the enterprise software that I've used of choice, in this instance, Office 365. And this is now a shared collaborative document that those 3 individuals that I've added have a right to edit and work upon. The great thing about this is it's saved in the Office instance and it's saved in the Canvas instance. So teachers have a controlled environment in which they can look at the progression and outcomes that have been manufactured. So here is where we tend to see a teacher that may have given a framework or they may have given a sheet of paper for students to work through with some predefined questions and answers. You can see here that as one of the people as part of this, I can type in here, and that could happen across all the collaborators. What we really want to do, and what modern learning management systems are really good at, is about stripping away the technical requirements around seamlessly integrating a nice workflow so the focus can continue to be on collaboration and, in this instance, reciprocal teaching. So perhaps I've done a document and we want to submit this as an assessment. If I just go up here, I can just go to Office Add-ins. I can add an assignment submission. And while still staying on track, whilst not leaving the most critical thing that I need to do, this document, whether it's an assessment or an assignment, Microsoft knows what courses I'm in. And with a nice, quick, easy click, it's going to open up all of those and I can submit directly to the assignment of my choice. This is a nice way, and one of the things that when we talk about seamless workflows, it's really, really important that we keep students and teachers within the confines of what it is that we want them to achieve and how we want them to achieve, away from the technical side, away from the different workflow. It's around making it seamless and nice and easy so we can focus on the task at hand. So that's one of the ways, and I'm just not going to submit this for the moment because we'll be taken back to the submission screen, but that's one of the ways in which we can start to foster collaboration and particularly enable our reciprocal teaching model. One of the other ways that we can do this, and I'm just going to close this down, is via discussions just above that. So if I click into discussions, as a teacher, I'm going to get a nice little discussion board. Now this is going to show me a snapshot of the different details. What are some of the pin discussions that I'm part of? What are the discussions that my students are working on? What are related to an assignment? What are the things that I'm going to be marking or giving feedback on? Or what are the things that just in the social aspect of teaching and learning, my students might be collaborating on? If I hover over here, I can see that we've had 4 replies in this. I'm subscribed to this topic. We can see a due date. And if I click into it, it's actually going to take me to the photo stream. Now, what I wanted to do is showcase that even though I've shown you some traditional ways in which we leverage information or we deliver content, some of those Microsoft documents, many of you may be thinking, well, that's great. Maybe it's for a slightly older audience. Well, what I want to do here is to showcase how, particularly in the young ages and the young year groups, we can actually put together a nice, logical, controlled, linear discussion thread that we can get some really great feedback and rich content through. So here we have a photo stream. We are studying habitats. Add your images about habitats in the space below. This is a nice small group collaborative exercise. So I have some people in the class who've already added things. Someone has either taken a picture with their phone and uploaded it, or they already have a picture on their computer and they've added it. In addition to that, someone might have actually put in a YouTube video and wanted to add in a Google document. So how do I, as a student, navigate what we've spoken about as being the fragmented third-party landscape in a nice, easy, seamless way, and enable us to deliver rich content back within a collaborative and reciprocal teaching environment? Well, if I go in here and write a reply, you'll notice that, and I alluded to it earlier when we were in the assignment tab, that I have what's called a rich content editor here. Now this, I don't want to use too many terms here. This is a place where you put stuff, where you can grab all those great third-party applications that you know and love and put it in a single place to go that's seamless, easy to use, and enables better student outcomes. I have a number of traditional things that I could add in here. I could link to URLs, insert media. But maybe as someone in junior school, what I actually want to do is I want to embed an image, and then I want to have a look at maybe a YouTube video, or maybe share something that I've got as a Google document. So if I click on embed image, I can go over to Flickr Creative Commons here, and you know what? We're talking about habitats. I want to look at grassland. And just like that, I have all these licensed images that I could use, and I want to use this one here. And with a single click, I've been able to get that on my discussion board. I haven't left the LMS. I haven't had to copy, save, upload, insert the image. What we really want to do is we want to focus on being able to prompt a discussion, prompt feedback, strip away those technical requirements. So below that, maybe I want to add a YouTube video. And this has historically been quite difficult, particularly for a very young student. Well, if I click on YouTube here, and maybe I want to put something about habitats, and I saw a great little video that really helped me understand a little bit more about the certain animals that might be in these habitats. If I click on enter, I can now see all of these different YouTube videos, stripped of ads, stripped of comments, stripped of suggested videos. I can vet these as a teacher, but as a student, oh, this is the one that I really liked. I'm just going to click on embed, and there we go. So a nice, again, easy, seamless way for us to prompt rich content within a reciprocal teaching environment. The last thing I want to show, and because I've shown this in Microsoft, I want to show it in Google, and I've spoken to it. Maybe I actually want to input a Google document, because whether I save everything to my Google Doc or if I already have things that I've previously built in my Google Doc, I want to know that it's really important that I can take what I need from my drive and pop it into a discussion. So if I go here, I can actually go to Google Apps, and it's going to load up with my drive. Now this is just coming through here, but much in the same way as you've seen me embed and link things before. So I go just rolling through now and just coming through. I can actually go into a subfolder here that might be a demo subfolder, go into science, and maybe I want to add this. Now I can link that or embed that much of the same way that we saw before. And with a button click, I've now embedded that. Now when I post a reply as a teacher or as a student, we can now see how I've added that grasslands picture, I've added that YouTube video, and hey, if I've allowed it, I've put together a collaborative Google document that I want people to comment and focus on. So, you know, the ability to seamlessly create small groups that can leverage all the different elements of modern learning platform, and more importantly, the education ecosystem, while still giving teachers the ability to provide rich feedback and that just-in-time instruction, is critical to ensuring students actively partake, enjoy, and experience a fully rounded reciprocal teaching experience. It's not just saying go and do this. It's about enabling them and giving them a platform to be able to do it. And that's what we can show through cloud collaborations and through discussions. So guys, I'm mindful that we've got about 10 minutes to go now. The last two things that I want to talk about are acceleration and mastery learning. Very simple, very effective, very logical workflows within an LMS. Acceleration is a simple idea with significant consequence. Allowing advanced students to work ahead and control their own learning, some of that self-direction in learning, helps them learn and achieve more during the school year. It is important to note that this is one of several areas of acceleration that Hattie talks about. The others including focused learning and mastery, of which we've covered and will continue to cover in the next little bit. So I'm just going to go back to my dashboard and back into my trusted geology course. Learning platforms have often constructed subjects in modules. Blocking content together like modules enables teachers to organize course content by weeks, units, or other organizational structures. They create a linear flow, requiring students to review materials or complete assignments in a predetermined order. So I want to show you how very easily, as teachers or as an instructor, we can manipulate and change these to help with acceleration in our students. So if I go into the module view just here, I'm just going to click on modules. We're going to see a list of the modules I've got in my geology course. Now, while this is loading up, you can see I've got 6, 7, or 8 different modules here. Now, I have the luxury as a teacher, if I block these into modular pieces of content, of moving these to a desired location. So perhaps my students are working through it in a different order, or I actually want to adapt to certain accelerated students in my class in the order in which they've gone through things in a logical and progressive format. The great thing is year on year, if we want to look at different ways and better ways in which the modules have been structured and content's been delivered, we have the opportunity to do that. We can actually go one step further, and if I go into here, I can edit modules and I can start to create prerequisites and requirements. So as a teacher, I could lock this content until a certain date for everybody. Or if I really want to play to that acceleration that Hattie talks about, I can start to input these prerequisites and requirements. So maybe a prerequisite for this is I want students to finish module 1 and module 2. In fact, I can start to get more descriptive and more prescriptive in how I do things by adding specific requirements. Do I want students to complete all of the requirements? Maybe they need to complete one of these requirements, and I can go in, drill down, look at quizzes. And do I want them to be passive, or do I want them to be an active participant? Again, really important that we don't just give a platform for students to accelerate when they're being passive learners, but that they're actually active learners and we're rewarding them as such. So maybe I want them to score at least a certain mark out of 10 for this assignment, and that would be an 8. And in a nice, easy way, I can click Update Module, and you'll notice that there now in Matter and Minerals, it's giving me a nice overview of prerequisites, requirements, and what students need to do to run through these modules in a linear yet accelerated format. You can see how we've easily created this workflow, whilst also ensuring that teachers, are staying in control of it. Combined with other activities in Hattie's zone of desired effects, and leveraging other workflows that enable differentiated learning, like mastery paths, like those individualized learning pathways that I showed you, teachers can have a very direct and strong impact, not only on acceleration, but acceleration within the context of an individualized and differentiated learning pathway. Really, really simple, really, really powerful. So guys, the last one that I want to talk about is mastery learning. Mastery is really about, identifying knowledge gaps, pre and post assessment, and then targeting those gaps. Teachers can provide remediation or advancement based on the individual needs of each student. We've seen how leveraging modules, as I've just showed you, and creating customized individual learning paths, i.e. what in Canvas, what we call mastery paths, with differentiated tasks, can direct and support mastery learning. But I want to look at how we measure this. I've shown you how we can deliver this. Let me look at how we can measure this. And so I also want to do that within the context of highlighting additional opportunities that help direct student learning that are commonplace in learning platforms. So I'm going to go, believe it or not, into a different course this time. I'm going to go back to my dashboard. In fact, you know what? I'm actually going to click on courses to the left. And I'm going to go into physical science. Now, you will have known I showed the grade book very, very briefly post speed grader. But what I want to do is, from a teacher's point of view, go into the marks across all the students that will be in that course. Now, if we have a look next to marks, we've actually got what's called Learning Mastery, and this is a Learning Mastery gradebook. If I go into the Learning Mastery gradebook, I get a nice snapshot of how each of the students within my course are doing relative to the learning outcome. Now, these are outcomes that can be imported directly from state standards, or if you want to create these outcomes yourself, you can do that. So I can hover over each of these as a teacher, and I can actually have a look at how my students are going in a nice top-down view. I can see there that a small portion, early progress, about 46% approaching expectation, 46% are meeting expectation. So I can have a look against the outcomes at what sort of content or what sort of insight I may need to deliver as a teacher in order to help students increase their mastery in the particular outcome. If I look at particular students around here, what I can do is I can start to go to the right and unclick some of those where they're exceeding or meeting mastery, and I can start to have a look at what we like to call hotspots, or certain students that might be nearing mastery or might be well below mastery, and how we're able to target them. If I pick an individual like Miles, for instance, who might have not done so well in communicating information and ideas effectively, and click on him, I actually get a nice little, what we call a context card, or a snapshot of his marks, of his graded items, how his participation, how his activity actually compares to the class. And the great thing about identifying this within the context of the Learning Mastery gradebook is that I can, with a quick button, email Miles directly. And if you imagine the workflow that we've put together with modules and differentiated learning and mastery paths, we can actually tell Miles what we think is most suited for him in order to increase his mastery underneath the particular learning outcome. Further to that, I might notice that a number of students are actually not doing well in a particular outcome, and I know what that outcome relates to. So if I go back to the mark book just here, I know that outcome A might be hugely prevalent in the scientific method practice in CK12. And I know that, hey, we need to actually have a look at which students maybe didn't perform up to the expectations that we've set, so we can help and deliver additional content in order to increase their learning mastery. If I click on this little drop down here, I can message students who. And what was once a very time-consuming activity is now built into a very logical workflow. If I go scored less than, and I know that those that scored less than 10 got below the mastery that they needed, it instantly pre-fills that out in a very discrete way. And then I can send a message to those students telling them what I think is the next best activity or the next best piece of content that I think that they need to work through. Alternatively, because we know that keeping people at a level of mastery learning is always important as well, we can have a look at those that might be on the fridge or might be doing, not on the fridge, on the fringe, or might be doing well, that we also want to give additional content because we want them to keep at the level of mastery that they're at or exceed that level of mastery. And in a nice quick way, we can write a message, we can deliver that content and send that to them. Guys, these touch points in conjunction with a deep yet easily digestible view of student performance against outcomes and mastery further support how leveraging a modern learning platform can directly and positively impact student achievement. These are nice little small workflows that we can implement and activities that we can input that are really going to help us achieve the strategies within Hattie's Zone of Desired Effects. We're going to wrap up there. I want to thank you very much for your time, for taking an hour out of your day. Really, really appreciate it. And we hope to see you at our next event.